Okay, we're going to mount the rag joint sprocket onto the rear wheel. Of course, you're going to need your sprocket. You're going to, in your kit, you get 2 of these rubber donut holes that have 9 holes in it. Sometimes they go ahead and slit it for you. What you will need to do is cut it between 2 of the holes. Cut it there. That way it comes apart. I'll show you how we do that. Your 9 mounting bolts will go through here. The sprocket, I don't know if you can, well, you can see it here, it's dished. Meaning the teeth here are offset on one side of the sprocket. Where it is pushed out, the teeth are this way here, away from the plane. On the sprocket, you want this away from the wheel. That way this here is going to be mounted on the outside of the wheel. That's going to help push the chain away from the tire. We need every little bit of clearance we can get to keep that chain from rubbing on the tire. If we mounted it with it dished on the inside, on the huffies, here it's going to rub against the tire. Typically, if you've got the 2.125 inch tire, you're going to want to mount it to where the sprocket, the teeth of the sprocket is pushed away from the wheel. We've got our 9 mounting bolts. With this kit, you get both lock washers and the flat washers. You're going to want to use both if you got them. And then we've got the nylock nuts. The tools you're going to need, I recommend, I use a bench vise here. You're going to use a hammer. You need a 10 millimeter socket. I use a 1/4 inch here with a little bit of an extension. Works for me. You're going to need a 10 millimeter wrench. You're going to need some flat blade screwdrivers. I use a cheater bar that helps me break the brake arm off of the hub, and a 17 millimeter wrench. And of course, on our parts list, we've got the 3 mounting brackets. The box that comes with the muffler in it, I use that so I don't scuff up my wheel. This way here, you can put the wheel in the vise, clamp it down, and it's going to hold the wheel. First thing we're going to have to do, we remove the axle nut. Set it aside. It's a 17 millimeter wrench that goes on the nut here that's holding your brake arm on. Pay attention to the order of things here. You've got the large nut here that is uses a bigger wrench than your axle nut. That large nut. Then you've got the washer. Then you've got the brake arm. Then you have the dust cap and all the internal components here. I'm going to use this piece of tubing here to hold the brake arm in place. When I break this loose, your brake arm, you're probably going to have to bend the brake arm out a little bit. I'll show you here. Once we get everything tightened up, the nuts on the sprocket might bump against this here, so you may need to bend this out and then bend it back in, but we'll get to that later. Okay, this is the dust cap for the bearing. We've got a problem here. The dust cap will need to ride inside of the hole here in the sprocket and turn freely. When you get the sprocket snugged up tight against it, it's going to rub against. Okay, so we've got the dust cap here. Like I said, we're going to have to trim off this part that comes down here, and we're going to trim about a 1/16 of an inch in here. That way this will mount inside, can go through the hole in the sprocket. This is kind of hard to hold like it is, so what I'm doing is I'm going to take a washer, put it through here. Here's the washer that went against the brake arm. And I'm going to make a little mounting setup here. What we want to do is get the washer centered. This is a 1/4 inch fender washer that's in there. And then what we're going to want to do here, we're going to grind almost up to the washer there. This fender washer here easily goes through there. So you want to leave about that much gap there, about maybe a 1/16 of an inch gap beyond the washer. I just rigged up this bracket here to hold it for me. Okay, we're going to break out the grinder. I use the grinder because I can get a lot of metal off real fast. As you can see, we got just a little bit more room to go, not much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this up on my bench grinder. Okay, and you've got a little bit of slag and extra metal there. You're going to want to grind that off. Okay, we're going to take a utility knife and we're going to cut right here. We want to cut between the holes. Looks like we got an extra lock washer in there. Cut between the holes like so. We've got this one cut. This one is going to go on the inside and it's going to wrap around the hub. Just go ahead and let that sit for now. We're going to take our 9 bolts. Now remember, we're going to put the dished part of the sprocket on the outside. That way the teeth are the furthest out. If I put it the other way, the teeth are going to be too far against the spokes. We want them out. So go ahead and put your 9 bolts in. Okay, we've got the 9 bolts in. Then what you want to do is take your other rubber donut here, and you want to push the bolts through each of the holes. I recommend doing it like that. It'll probably stick on it fine. There we go. So we got all 9 through. So then this is going to push through the holes here and into the other rubber on it, and then you're going to take your 3 mounting plates and push them over this. So this rubber here is going to be, you're going to have the spokes here, you're going to have the other rubber piece, and then you're going to have this mounting bracket on the other side of your rubber donut. Okay, here's where it gets difficult. I've got the sprocket pushed through. What we're going to do is we're going to slowly work the inside rubber donut onto the bolts. Okay, like I said, I've got the splice on the rubber donut on the inside. I've got it between 2 of the mounting holes on the plate. What you don't want to do is have the splice at the same place where where you join 2 mounting plates together. You want to have your splice running between 2 of the bolts in the middle of your mounting plate there. That way it helps keeps things aligned so much easier. So we're going to work our way on around. And this is a battle you're going to win just by little bitty baby steps. You're not going to be able to get it all on, everything on in the way you want it aligned at once. We're just going to slowly work our way through this here and get it just one bolt at a time. I'm putting my washer on, my lock washer, and get it on. So we've got the sprocket, we've got the outer rubber donut, the rag. We have the spokes. We have the inner rubber rag. We have the mounting plate. We then have the flat washer, the lock washer, and the nylock nut. Now let's go ahead and work our way on around. I'll be back in just a few. Okay, as you tighten these up, sometimes where the two plates come together, one may try to overlap the other. What you'll need to do is get a screwdriver between the two and work it to where they mount flush. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to take our 10mm wrench, we're going to fit it in on the inside, and then I'm going to use a 10mm socket here, and then I'm going to use a 10mm socket on the outside. So put your wrench on the inside, tighten it up with the socket. You only want to tighten it just enough to where the nut is just starting to tighten up just a little bit here. Work your way all the way around. I'll do some on one side and then I will go to the exact opposite side. Okay, so what you got to do as you tighten up your bolts here, you want to make sure that your sprocket is centered with respect to the bearing. So you can look here and see if your sprocket is shifted one way or the other, and you can take a screwdriver. As long as you don't have these bolts real tight, you've got a little wiggle room. You can move it. So right now it's a little bit too far that way. And right now I have it lined up just the way I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the bolts. I'm going to do a couple here, down there, and I'm going to work one side to the next and slowly get them all tightened up. Okay, now I have it pretty snug all the way around. My dust cap is pushed in firmly and the whole assembly spins. It's not going to bind any. That's very important, because if this dust cap binds, you're not going to be able to pedal the bike. Your chain on the other side isn't going to be able to pedal the bike properly. Turn it, everything rotates freely. There's no slop in the bearing. Your bearing shaft is not going to go that way. Otherwise, you need to tighten up a little bit here. Now I'm turning this just a little bit and holding the nut on the other side, holding it tight, and I've got it snug. And everything turns freely in there. We're going to put the dust cap back on. Now then, we're going to take the brake arm, put the brake arm on. So we've got the brake arm and the washer. We're going to put the 17mm nut back on. We're going to get that snug on there. Let's get the vise to hold our wheel. I'm going to use my cheater bar. Tighten the nut up. You want to get it pretty tight. And then your brake arm needs to rotate all the way around. This way here, the brake arm is not hitting the nuts here. It rotates all the way around. Otherwise, you need to bend your brake arm out and then bend it back, because it's going to bolt onto the frame here. So if we bend it too far out, it's not going to bolt to the frame. We'll have to bend it in. And if you bend it in, the brake arm will strike the nuts. So you want to be careful. And when you put it on the bike, you don't want to put any force on the sprocket, because you'll bend the sprocket. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to put it on the bike, we're going to spin it, and we don't want to see the sprocket move in and out. But if your spokes may be a little bit out of a line, so on your high spot where it's too far out, we're going to hit it with a hammer and push it in.